Right, and now we are on the minute. So yeah, welcome to Dialog Fall 2025. So this is the first time we've done a fall Dialog user meeting in the US. So the current event schedule, we've been doing these global user meetings every year. We've decided now to reduce the frequency to every 2 years. So there isn't a global meeting this year. The next one will be Eastbourne in the UK, returning to the Dialog 14 venue if you were there.
Have they rebuilt the pier?
Sorry?
There was a fire at the pier the day before.
Yes, they've rebuilt the pier, so it's a good time to come back and see what they've done in Eastbourne. The plan is then to have this event, which is, the current plan is it's a one-day free event, which is what we're having now, and then there's paid workshops tomorrow. But we'll send out a questionnaire to you all after the event to see whether we should try going to 3 days or what next year, in 2 years' time, sorry. But in the spring, early April, we'll repeat what we did this year. So there'll be a spring dyno, which will be one-day free event. We're currently looking at this date, so the 13th of April. So if that's good or bad, give us some feedback on that. So what about the Dialog New York City meetup? So some years ago, we created on meetup.com this meetup. And you can see there's 39 members. But when we published this event on that site, we got 3 people sign up that way. So this has become very dormant. And I think what we're thinking at Dialog is we're going to let this lapse. We won't renew it unless somebody in New York City says they want to take over, and then we'll pay the $100 a year or whatever it is to keep it alive. So if you want to volunteer for that, Chris is nodding. Let us know, otherwise it'll disappear. Okay, so here's the schedule for today. We've tried to put together something that will inspire everyone in some way or another. Most of the sessions are 30 minutes. There's a couple that are longer where we go into a bit more depth. There's 7 presentations by Dialog people. And a big thank you to our users, 2 users who are going to be sharing experience reports. That'll be right now. Unfortunately, we've given them the slot after lunch, but try to come back alive for that. So thanks to Alex and Mark for that. And then to round things off with a bit of fun and hope for the future, we'll have Holden showing us a game that he's been developing, a 3D APL game. And Diane's going to give us an update on the APL Trust, how that's going. Okay, so you may have noticed in these sessions, if you come to them regularly, that my slot gets smaller and smaller. And that's because I'm able to bring all these people. This is only 5 of us driving down from Rochester yesterday. I have a whole minivan of people to do presentations after mine, going into depth on various topics. Yeah, nice picture. It's a roadmap presentation, so there's always a picture of a road, and I have to come up with a story. So this is, we kind of know where we're going, right? But as you can see, there's bends in the road. It never takes, it always takes more time to get there than you think. You're all software developers, most of you, so you know that. I was very gratified. Stefan, who joined us not that long ago, said he had reviewed many of my roadmap presentations, and he said, although it often takes longer to get there than I said, in general, we do live up to, eventually we do the stuff that we say we will in the roadmap. So, yeah, the plan is unchanged. Fortunately, we are blessed with existing customers who generally pay us according to how much they use our product, how many copies of their product they ship, or how many transactions they're doing online, whatever. And that continues to grow. At the same time, we have migrants arriving on our shores, and we welcome them. And you'll have 2 of them speaking after lunch today, recent migrants. We are working hard to grow our team. So when I joined Dialog 20 years ago now, there were 5 people at Dialog. Now we're 30. We have some, double. We have young people working with older people, gray-haired people. We want to make sure that the kids are ready for the day when some of us will inevitably retire. And we're now in a position, we have enough people to not only take good care of the existing users, but really this is something we have sort of 4 or 5 people in the company now who are really focusing on finding that new generation of young users. And it's really good to see, it's great to see all my old friends here, but I did a quick look at the list, and it seems to me, rough head count, about 20% of the people here are in the first 15 months or so of a new APL-related job, either as implementers or as application developers. And that also sort of roughly fits the Dyalog team. About nearly half of the Dyalog people who are here have been here for a short while. But of course, life as an APL vendor, this is, if you've been to APL conferences, you'll recognize this. It's one of Gitte Christensen, our former CEO who retired a year ago, one of her favorite images. This year with an apple, Sisyphos is pushing an apple thanks to Mike Mingard, who is our new brand manager and a wizard with images and artificial intelligence to put together. So I need a picture of Sisyphos, APL related, and bang, 10 minutes later, I have this. So thank you, Mike. A lot of what's in this presentation is thanks to Mike. So, but the point of the story is that there's so much of what we do as a APL vendor, which is really, we get hit by, there's a new technology. We have to do something to make the APL interpreter fit into that. It's not what we really want to do because we're really all language geeks and we want to be developing, adding new primitives and so on. But 80 or 90% of what we do is this kind of task. And migration tools is one that we're working on now. We say, well, why do we need that? Well, it's because technologies are shifting. So some people want to move their applications from APL plus Win or micro APL to Dialog APL. And APL plus Win has a Windows interface, which is roughly equivalent in functionality to the Dialog APL, but of course different. So Davin, who's at the back there somewhere, has been working on something we call deltaWI, which is our cover functions that allow APL plus Win applications to run in Dialog APL. So this is Alex's application. This is a public demo, right? So I can show this without, yeah. So this is a mining application where Alex will talk more about that. But as you can see, well, you can't see that it's running under Dialog APL because it looks exactly the same as the old one. That's kind of the point. Then people who are using Dialog APL but need to move, say, from Windows to run their application on Linux or Mac OS on the web somewhere, they have the same problem. They have GUI applications that they now need to translate to something else. They could sit down and rewrite the UI using some modern technology, but often you have like thousands of panels and forms that you really don't want to invest in. So this is a Dialog APL application, an old one, probably 20, 30 years old, running under Windows. And this is a screenshot of the same application running under this EWC thing. So it's nowhere near complete. It's being driven by, well, in this application is sort of the launch application. So we're making sure that it can do the things with grids and tree views and so on that this application needs. But this is a very typical Windows desktop application. So we think it's a good place to start. So that's something we're working on. We're trying to make sure that, so this is that EWC thing, our cover for our own Quad WC. This is a charting package called Apex Charts, which is just a JavaScript package for doing charting. So we're grafting a bunch of new classes into EWC so that it isn't just there to run your old desktop applications. You can start by migrating, and then you can start adding new controls. You can use flex layout instead of giving the position and size of everything. So although it's in some ways a backward-looking project, we're trying to make sure that it's also going to allow people to make really modern applications. Okay, and underlying actually deltaWI, we have something called ATFIN, The old timers may recognize ATF, APL transfer format, which was invented, I don't know, 50 years ago, maybe. So we have our new version of that, which will read APL transfer format files from APL plus Win or micro APL or APL2, but then also make some language changes so that the code will run without much change to the application code. Sometimes there are things that you just have to go in and manually change, but we'll have a presentation later today about static analysis of APL code, where we may have a new tool in our belt for finding those things that you need to go in and manually change, or maybe do them automatically. So far, we haven't actually published much of this. The focus has been on working with the launch customers rather than publishing the tools. But this winter, hopefully, we'll do that. And Davin, is still the plan, right, Davin? You're going to rewrite all that stuff, because although it was sufficient for the first application, we know that there are other APL Plus applications out there which are much more sophisticated and where the prototype isn't quite up to it. Yeah. So more work to do, pushing rocks up hills. And then all that stuff will just be, in 10 years' time, that'll all have been a waste of time. Well, not for the people who managed to migrate, of course. So another thing that's coming our way is the rise of this new chip, 64-bit ARM chip, which is inside the new Macs. It's attractive because it's a low-power chip, so it consumes much less power, which means not only does your Mac live longer, but if you're running on the cloud, you pay less money because you're basically paying for power consumption when you deploy applications on the cloud. So we now have the Linux in version 20 of Dyalog APL, which is not yet released. Next week, maybe. We support ARM64 Linux. And I didn't check this with John Daintree, but I know that he's noodling, as he likes to say, with these on his desktop. He has a new Mac, and he's looking at an Android port. We think probably the first year, Andy won't let us declare that these are supported, but they'll be there for people to play with and give us feedback. So another little apple going up the hill. If you know about .NET and generics, this may interest you. If not, you can just zone out until the next slide. So there's this idea of generic classes where a class can take a parameter that gives you some kind of modified class. In version 20, there's this hideous-looking IBeam 443 IBeam 632, which is an operator where you can provide these parameters T1 and T2 in this case to create an instance of a class. And we think now we've pretty much settled on this syntax, so we're going to overload the square brackets yet again, but in a way which we don't think is confusing. So if you need to use generics, and a lot of people are very interested in using .NET because .NET is now also cross-platform, so you get .NET on Mac and Linux as well. This is very useful to some people. Yeah, this is perhaps not a new technology thrown at us, but the need to execute external programs from APL as people maybe switch more to using Linux than Windows is more and more interesting. We've had this thing called Quad CMD since the beginning of time. It has a whole bunch of shortcomings, mostly the negative version of these bullet points. These are all things that didn't work the way they should with Quad CMD. So perhaps, interruptible. So you can call something, and if it doesn't return, you don't just have to kill your APL interpreter. You can hit interrupt, and it will kill the process, the external process. And then managing all the data streams with different encodings, you can even say you want to handle these as asynchronous streams and get events as information comes back from an external shell program. And select various alternative shells, or indeed what I find I usually want to do is just invoke programs directly without using the shell, because that's way more efficient. Script engine. Again, this is something that appeals mostly to new people coming from Macs and Linuxes who are accustomed to writing programs in Python or some other scripting language in this form. You see, this is just a bunch of APL statements and a bit of magic at the beginning. You'll recognize it as it's a program. It asks the user for some input, and then it gets the numbers out and then computes the average. And the way people might use that is they might have an input file, in this case nums.txt, which contains some numbers. And then from the command line, they can call this average APL script, piping the nums in. And what's interesting is it's not just the new users who want this. In the really big companies, the people doing continuous integration and building pipelines to deploy their code, they also think this is the right way to do stuff. So it's something we've been, this has gone way too slowly. We've been sort of nibbling away at this for a number of releases. Now we have Stefan joined us, what is it, 3 years? 3 years ago already. He's pushing hard for this, so you have a champion. If you really want us, if you don't think we're doing well enough, talk to Stefan. He'll come and beat John Daintree and myself up. How many people now using Link to manage source code? Oh, that's disappointing. So this is something that I now consider to be mainstream. It's not really changing from one release to the next. So in the last release, we added, a little nice feature where if you have a vector of character vectors, the array notation that we recently added isn't a very convenient way to represent text data. So there's a nicer way where your text is just like a regular text file and you get it loaded into an APL array. And if you have tens of thousands of source files, like we have one customer using this who has 90,000 functions, which maps to 90,000 source files. So they don't really want Link to be reading 90,000 files when the system starts. So they create a workspace, they save the workspace, and then they create a link saying that they have preloaded everything. And then Link just carries on from there. Typically, you would then shell out and do a git diff or something like that to find the 5 files that actually changed, or just look at the timestamps and load those. But so that's a sort of level we're at with Link now. It's in production, very large systems, and pretty stable. There's one thing we've been looking to do. You don't have file system watchers everywhere, and there's some things you can do to change code in ways that Link won't discover. That's sort of the one big thing I think we're missing with Link. But we'll also do something else I'll get back to in a minute. Miscellaneous stuff, new open source documentation format. Many of you, the old timers at least, remember this gentleman, Peter Donnelly, who sold Dyalog 21 years ago. He went off to a Greek island, but he continued writing our documentation. Most of the technical documentation in the last 20 years was written by Pete after he retired as the managing director of Dyalog. And but he left now, so we decided it was time to change to a completely new tool chain and so on. And Stefan wrote the code that merged everything into. So this is all marked down now. And it's much more collected in one place as a nice searchable website. So that's really good work. And it's open source. So if you're keen to help us improve the documentation, you spot a comma that's missing, clone the repository, send us pull requests, and we promise we'll take them seriously. There's a Kafka interface, so an interface to the Kafka streaming platform that one of our big customers wants. Martina's going to be talking about that later. There's little things that people ask for, the ability to set the date or other attributes of a file. And if you're doing a move of 10,000 files, you can get callbacks as it goes. And this is one of my favorites. We have a thing we call platform features, which is still in version 20. It's this nasty looking I-beam. It's a nested namespace. If you pass it to quad-JSON, so this is an interesting thing that's just sort of popped up unexpectedly. If you have a nested namespace and you pass it to quad-JSON with compact 0, so don't make it compact, but put in all the new lines, then you get this very readable description of a namespace. And we just zoom in on a bit of it so you can see it better. So this is a thing that returns everything that an application might want to know about the environment. You know, it's a 64-bit environment built for Windows, optimized build. It's here. Is RIDE connected? Is it a runtime? Is it a Unicode interpreter? What's the version number, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah? Tons and tons of stuff. What's the path separator for the operating system, and so on. So that's going to be a quad something in version 21, I hope. So that was about the drudgery. Now for some fun, right? So this is a dialogue interpreter developer who's been allowed to do something that doesn't feel like pushing a stone up to, and of course with Mike's help, we can stay in the APL, in the Apple theme. Yeah, so what have we been working on there? Well, array notation. So a better way to, instead of building a nested vector by doing this kind of thing, you can now write it over multiple lines. If parentheses or braces span a line, here's a multi-dimensional, two multi-dimensional examples, then it's notation for an array. So you don't have to, this is particularly useful when you're teaching APL. You can just say, well, here's a matrix, right? We write it like this, instead of having to explain reshape or transpose and comma bar and so on to generate the array. This is really going to affect the way, this is very important for people who are storing source code in text files. The part of it which I think will really affect the way we all write code is that it also includes a namespace notation. So what we see here is a people vector, which is a two-element vector of namespaces. The first one has two variables in it, name and weight, and the last one only has a single variable. So if we ask for people.name, so this syntax is something that's been in Dialog APL for 25 years. Yeah, there's nothing new here. There's nothing new here either. This fails because the second namespace doesn't have a weight variable. But then along with this namespace notation that we have a new primitive in version 20, which amongst other things, so this is to really driven to replace the use of execute everywhere, right? If you wanted to, under program control, get a value of a variable out of a namespace, you would typically use execute for that. And in this day and age where everybody is really concerned about security, executes in your code are a big red flag. So this allows you to avoid the use of execute, and then of course we added things like saying, well, if there's no weight, give it the value 50. So we didn't dare to ask Jill her weight, and we'll just assume it's 50. And you can do things like, well, for the first person, give me all the variables and their values, stuff like that. Really useful stuff. If you want to see more about that, when we release version 20, which should be very soon, Adam has recorded. It's a real shame Adam couldn't be here, because he could have explained this much better than me, but he will be doing that in one of these videos. So you can go and watch those once version 20 is out. Another cool thing, inline tracing. This is something APL plus Win has had for ages. So the ability to trace not a line at a time, but a token at a time. So here we are at the equals in this DFIN DTB. And we can see here what the left argument is and what the right argument is to that primitive when we got to that point. So again, very useful, particularly when you're learning APL. Or if you're trying to debug something that maybe is a little bit more complicated than it should have been, which does happen. Right, and then the real cool stuff, right? A really new squiggle. Reverse compose. Because one of the things we're trying to do in our quest to recruit the new generation of users is we're trying to be friends with the functional programming community, because we notice that when we go and do presentations at FunctionalConf or LambdaConf, they recognize APL as a cousin. APL makes sense to them, which is really refreshing. And it's been pointed out to us that they're very much into things they call combinators, which correspond to our operators. And they pointed out that this operator was missing. APL had pretty much a complete set of combinators, but we didn't have this one. So we've done it. And it is kind of useful. You can do things like, here's a predicate function, 5 less than, and then you can say 5 less than after, for some reason, compress. And then you get things like this. Or you can say max behind equal and find the ones that are the maximum. Cool, if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, so that's stuff that we've done, right? So looking forward, where are we going? So I found this picture, and I put in some destinations. And I'm going to go through each one of them. Let's not dwell too much here. But before the destinations, can't emphasize this too much. Get your APL source code into text files, because there is so much modern tooling that you're going to want to use to test and deploy. And Stefan's going to show if you want to use AI to help you develop code, all the AI is going to expect you to have your APL code in text files. As I said, LINQ now is pretty mature, but we now think we understand the problem well enough that we're going to add to the interpreter the ability to load text natively. So you won't need LINQ to work with folders full of text. That will become like a native form of source code, just like workspaces. And we're trying to build a foundation for loading modules and libraries. If you're using LINQ, don't worry, because we know there are features of LINQ that, I'm not going to use the L word, but applications that started out with binary code structures need some features that we don't think we're going to put into the interpreter. So like case coding and yeah, never mind, you might remember them if you're using them. So here's a little sketch, and Aaron, don't get too worried. This is not settled. We're still discussing it. So this is a namespace script, and you see it has a new thing here, insert part 1 and insert part 2. And that's just saying that, because this is something that's been missing from our language support for scripts so far, is the ability to take anything you want to define and break it up into multiple source files. You're sort of forced to have the whole thing in one file. So this just says, well, take part 1 and insert it as if it was typed here, and part 2 as if it was inserted there. And then quad import will just say, well, define this thing, load it, sort it all out. And if we then call my namespace foo, it will have been included. And it returns the names of all the functions, and that, of course, now all the functions defined either here or there. So that's the current model, but we're still arguing about it. There's still blood on the floor in the Bramley office. We see that as we've been experimenting with this package manager called Tatin. It hasn't sort of taken off. We're starting to see people contribute to it. We've decided now that really we want to sort of take a little bit of a break on it and work out this native language support in the interpreter for loading modules, and then we'll push on. We know that we need a command line interface so that you can install a package from outside APL. It's a very strange idea for many of us old-time APLers that you would ever want to do something from outside APL. But in fact, Holden got impatient and he just built one. But I think we're going to have to talk about how we take that over somehow. Maybe we could have you as an intern. Yeah, I've already said that. And then we hope that we and you will really get into this business. When it becomes really easy to load and distribute packages, we'll have many more of them. It's been a long journey, but we're getting there. So open source is becoming more and more important. It's related to the tech stuff. We don't see a way in my lifetime to open source the language engine. What we have done is that most of the tools that we write in APL and we put in the package manager in Tatin, that is all free and open source. So all the stuff that we Dyalog write in APL, so like EWC, deltaWI, We're not going to charge anybody for that. It's just out there for you to use as you will. We're now planning to also open source some of the C code, so not the language engine, but typically the interfaces, because we recognize community contribution is very important, for attracting a new generation of users. For cryptographic applications and communications applications, allowing people to inspect and verify that your code is correct is important. And there are some open source tools that we embed where there's a requirement for people to be able to build our components using modifications to that. And if we open source our code, it makes it easier to comply with those licenses. Today you have to write to Dyalog and we'll tell you how to build Conga if you must. Nobody's asked yet, but eventually maybe someday somebody will.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Oh, yeah.
Yes?
Yes, I'm worried about security implementations.
Yes, yeah. So the Kafka interface is already, it's a GitHub, it's the first tool we've put out where it's free and open source. You can pay for support from Dyalog if you wish. You can voluntarily sign up for support for the Kafka interface. We're planning in version 21, so the next release, that the HTML renderer, which is our wrapper for Chromium, and Conga, which is our wrapper for TCP, UDP communications, and including SSL and GNU TLS is built into it. There'll be at least prototypical versions of that with version 21. And eventually we plan to build some kind of cryptographic library for people who don't want to just use what's in .NET, etc., but want something really cross-platform for that. Yep, so the holy grail for APL, it's a parallel language. Why isn't the execution more parallel? We've had the isolate workspace has been available for more than 10 years now. It hasn't really been used by people. There's some people using it. We think it's partly because it's a model, and we said it's a model. Parts of it are written in APL. These APL people want to wait until Dyalog turns it into a quad something or a primitive before they think it's worth learning. So this may not be in the next release. It may take us a couple of releases to get there, but we will turn this into a primitive to make it clear that it's a thing. Anything invoked with this will work the same way as isolates do today. You get a future back, and then you can just pass it around until you pass it to a primitive that actually needs the value, and then the interpreter will automatically block. So you don't need semaphores or anything like that. It's a very simple programming model, very easy to use. The plan is that we will support isolates, which we already do, of course, but we'll make them primitive. The existing ampersand operator, which launches a green thread, so you get this virtual time slicing within the interpreter, will also be folded into this. It's a bit impractical at the moment because it doesn't return future. We'll have a way to launch those threads and get a future back. And then multiple interpreters running on completely separate OS threads within a process will also be folded into this. So that then gives you access to parallelism using essentially multiple interpreters. If you want to use GPUs and go really parallel, you need a compiler. And that's where Co-dfns, Aaron's work, comes in. Or is it becoming CODFNs? Aaron's been a bit stalled today, this year, because we have a commercially very important project, not in terms of money to us, but because we have customers who are being faced with the requirement to be audited by their, they sell software to banks. The banks are saying, are you doing static analysis of your application code? And no is not the correct answer, okay? You lose the contract. So we've been asked by a couple of our major customers to build this tool so that they can say, we are using the premier static analysis tool on the market with a straight face. I don't personally think it's a terribly useful way to find security vulnerabilities, but it's, you must also do this. So initially, these are consulting projects. They'll be licensed separately, but I hope that after a few years we'll be able to turn this into some kind of community edition that you can use. Now we've been building on the Co-dfns technology, the parser and so on, to construct this, which is why Co-dfns itself has been taking a little bit of a break to, while Aaron and Brandon work on this. They'll talk about that in a bit. Now, of course, you can't do a roadmap talk these days without mentioning the elephant in the room. But fortunately, we have two talks today. Mark is going to talk after lunch. He has arrived, I think. No, not yet. He's going to talk about how he's using large language models to enhance his application. And if I just finish talking, then Stefan's going to talk about experiments he's been doing to see whether the current LLMs are getting anywhere close to being useful tools for developing APL code, either explaining code or writing code or testing code. Stefan will talk about that in a few minutes. And then there's sort of the getting back to basics, right? So when I was young, data science was, we didn't know it was called data science, but pretty much every APL application that was written is some form of data science. Today, of course, the Python is eating our apple. And so now we have grown enough, right? The revenue has grown enough for us to really start to take this seriously, not just talk about it. So we have sort of four or five people who, they're not working full-time on this, but they are required to meet regularly to talk about it and to give recommendations to the development teams. Now, what are we going to do to improve all of these things? Now, first of all, where are the opportunities, right? Is there an opportunity for APL? We think there is. We just need to identify it. What do we need to improve to become more competitive? Yeah, we want to get there. No, AI is wonderful in Mike's hands. So we need to be able to load data much faster. We can see we actually need faster matrix multiplication. Curiously, no APL applications almost do matrix multiplication, so it isn't one of the things that APL interpreter vendors have tended to optimize. We have to provide easy access to the large language models. We need new visualization tools. And we need to support these data formats for sharing with other data science-y tools. So there are these formats known as Arrow and Parquet that we need to build support for. And of course, we need to integrate with Python because we're not going to get people to dump Python for APL. Initially, we were thinking, okay, what we need to be able to do is use Python packages from APL. But again, Stefan and others who are coming from the outside are saying, well, maybe actually you want to make APL a package that Python people can use in conjunction with their tools. So that means maybe this is the right way to go. Get the apple inside the Python. Okay, so again, reaching out to a new generation. We have changed the annual competition that we run. We used to have this problem-solving competition, which Brooke helped us set up. Yeah, remember that?
Well, you set it up.
Yeah, but you gave us the idea, and that worked quite well for a while. But we sort of got this feeling that we were attracting mostly computer science students who were like serial language killers. So they would learn another language every week, and they would win a competition, and then they'd be gone. They had no real interest in APL. So under the guidance of our new CEO, we have a new competition where we're actually asking people to write sort of complete things and submit them to the APL Forge, to the contest. And so it's an annual event, and we have Holden, he's here, he won the first one for a radar ingest system. So he could see the planes flying by, they transmit ADS-B data. So that's super cool. And we've just, Borna, just been announced as the winner this year. He has written, what is it exactly? It's APL learning, it's a machine learning framework for APL. So come to Eastbourne next year, and he'll be presenting the work that he did there. And this open source stuff is also really helping with, driving the engagement of young people out there. So we decided a long time ago that we would make our remote IDE, which is sort of kind of a poor copy of our Windows IDE, but runs on Mac and Linux, that we would make that open source, and we would also publish the specification for the protocol, the communication between the IDE and the interpreter. And there's this fellow called Zyma, also a former winner of the problem-solving contests and a writer of at least one array language interpreter, I think probably several by now. He decided he was going to use the RIDE protocol for his own interpreters, so he could connect our RIDE to his interpreter, or suddenly one day we discovered somebody fired up, this is actually an Android phone, where they found out that our ARM64 interpreter just runs there. And this is Zyma's IDE. I can't tell you anything about how to use it, but this down here, the bottom half of that screen is the IDE that he built for his own interpreter. And it connects to our interpreter and drives it. This is the kind of cool stuff that starts to happen when you go open source, which is really different from how things used to be when I was a kid. Yeah, so you want to check that out. It's on GitHub, Android IDE. And this is part of the reason why we think we'll have an experimental Android version. We don't yet know how you would write GUI applications there, but we're working on it. Okay, so finally a bit about building the team, recruit in good time. Hopefully you'll see the young people here who we've recruited. I'm starting to feel really comfortable about my own retirement. Company isn't going to go belly up when I go. It's probably a stronger team, the strongest team that Dyalog has ever had. Now I feel this is going really well. We've decided to do something a little bit new and different, in that we offer consulting and training, where previously we had partners do that in Europe and the US. We think now there's a need for us to get into closer contact with the existing users to set the direction for the company. And we also have new users who need help building modern APL systems, make these technology migrations. So the three on the left are here today. Asher is actually officially his first working day today. He's giving a talk and a workshop tomorrow. Of course, he's a returning intern. He interned twice with us. Brandon joined us at the start of this year. Martina, a bit more than a year. Andrea's not here. She's the CEO's new assistant. And Neil down in Germany is our new combined JavaScript and APL expert working on EWC in particular. Interns, we try to do that every year. We had Asher twice. Camilla, you may remember, she did a presentation. Last year we had Brian, who created this Raylib APL, an interface to Raylib that Holden's going to be building on later today. So the plan is unchanged. This has been the plan for the last 20 years. I feel it's going okay. And a big thank you, before I hand over to Stefan, to Mike. I've already mentioned Mike, the awesome images. Behind the scenes back in the UK, Karen and Jada. And here, behind the scenes and on the scene later, Brian has done a huge amount of work to set this up. Yes, so as usual, I left 30 seconds for questions, but while Stefan is setting up, a question. Jay?
Yeah, the relative repeated dialysis work on the documentation.
Yeah.
What's the role of structured documentation now when we've gone from index to search to ChatGPT?
I think Stefan's actually going to talk a bit about that. Indirectly, yeah. So changing the documentation format to Markdown and making it public is actually critical to training the large language models, right? They need to ingest that stuff in order to be able to help with APL.
Will we be able to have access to that in sort of a notebook LLM type of format, or we just do it ourselves?
That's a good question. I'll leave that one for Stefan to answer. He's up next. Max?
Yeah, it's nice to see you get recognizing new hires. How about recognizing open source contributors?
Have you met Max? Yes, I apologize. I will try to do better.
Well, you won't have much to recognize anyways.
No, not yet. But it's one of these things where it's like this ketchup bottle that you're shaking. Yeah. One more.
Yes, I think, can you help us? Are you going to build a team or something to help us to cybersecurity?
I mean, it's the kind of thing that we would help with through the consulting team. Yeah, I don't think we have a sort of a specific cybersecurity team, but ask questions.
This is an issue that it is growing and growing and growing. You know?
Yeah. Yes, it is. I mean, it's a pain that APL. It used to be on the mainframe, perfect environment, right? Everything was taken care of. You just wrote your function, and that was it. I have this hope that eventually the infrastructure will mature to a point where we are back there. You just put something in a container and the IT department has taken care of the security, right? So you don't need to deal with secure sockets. They were secure when they came in through some kind of gateway and you just get a function call. Yeah. But it's a shame how difficult it has become to write applications. It's, yeah. Okay, thank you. And